All right, welcome to the first in the Developer's Guide series. Uh, the intro explained why I'm doing this, so I won't rehash that. These will be kept on the Vaicom GitHub site in the wiki, links to these videos, so that someone can pick it up and run with it if I should cease to stop developing the software. All right, so let's jump straight in. We said we're going to look at structure today, and that's what we are going to look at. Okay, I got Visual Studio 2022 open here at the moment, and as you can see, the current solution is my Vaicom. It says 2.8, which was back when I picked it up at 2.8. You'll have to create your own solution from GitHub, and if you're familiar with Visual Studio, you won't have any problems doing that. And once you jump in, well, let's just talk about the software itself. So it consists of 5 main modules. You've got Rio here, which is an extension, which is AI Rio extension. You have the theme pack, which is the Chatter extension. And you have Vaicom itself. The Vaicom app, which is basically the keeper exe that runs and keeps Vaicom or voice attack running, so should it crash, it will relaunch it while you're mid-game, which is pretty handy. And of course, the installer. Okay, so let's jump in, and we won't look at the extensions just yet. We'll go straight into the Vaicom itself, and all of the directory build targets are managed from this file. It just saves, just by changing the product version and assembly versions in this file, they'll cascade to the rest of the program. I added that in because I was so sick of updating them all. But we'll jump straight into Vaicom and have a look at its structure. You can see Vaicom has a list of its dependencies in here, so some NuGet packages and bits and pieces, and the different projects, which is Rio and theme pack. So I've made them a dependency in the Vaicom, the main DIL. And the reason I've done that is because they're free anyway, and there's no point having them separated outside the main Vaicom DIL. We have basically a properties section, which is just assembly info, the resx, things like that for Chatter. And the main areas we need to talk about is client, database, the file manager, and products, push to talk, resources, and the UI, and the server, actually. Jump in, have a look at client. So this is the call handling of Vaicom. So this is where the message construction takes place. And it starts at the initialize here. So you can see that this is initializing Vaicom as it loads into voice attack. And so it will load each section in. So this is the beginning of everything that Vaicom is all done through the initialize code. So I won't go through it. We're just looking at structure today. And then in the call handling is how it checks the radio in use. So this is a check to see what radio you have. And it also looks to see if it's a Flaming Cliffs 3 aircraft, or Rio or Oxmenu or things like that, where you don't actually need a radio tuned, because obviously Flaming Cliffs aircraft use easy comms the whole time, so it does a check for that. If it's not, it'll check for the radio to make sure you got the right radio tuned for the right recipient. We have a scan that takes place, looking through the actual recipients that online on that frequency at the time, and that's how Vaicom determines whether there is someone to talk to. Okay, so call handling, pretty important stuff going on here. To be honest, to maintain Vaicom, we don't have to do a lot here. This just works generally. But that's where it all is. If you're having problems with the call handling and things not going through as you would expect. And you obviously have your message construction as it passes each message. It's pretty straightforward. That, and you can just look through it. So there's your client, how it works. And then the database is probably where most of the maintenance work for Vaicom takes place. So in the database, it's set up as records, labels, and aliases. There is this edit tab here, which is just the training mode and how that works in the editor tab. But really the three things we need to worry about is records, labels, and aliases. And quite frankly, a lot of the work takes place in here. Let's dive just into these two here, which is input command table and message table. Now the DCS message table, this is auto-generated by a Lua dump that I do on DCS after each update to see what's changed. And basically it is all the messages from DCS. Now, when I dump these out, the format they come out is a CSV. You can see here, generated from CSV file. That's the last time I did it. And here's the code to actually do the dump. So this code goes into deep debug, but we'll talk about that in another episode. But that's where the code is that you need to update this DCS message table to make sure it's accurate. If this is not accurate, you'll have problems with Vaicom not actioning commands. And I've seen that a lot over the last couple of years. It's important to keep this up to date. That's how you do it. Input command table's an interesting one. So Hollywood must have put this input command table in for a future expansion of Vaicom. So it's my phone message, and you can see it's basically all the I commands in here. Now I have smiled a little bit. I know there's a lot of mission builders out there who would love a list of I commands like this, but it's basically every control on every module. It's an awesome list. And anyway, so this is where it lives, and also is updated from a Lua dump. Now this is the catch. Hollywood was nice to leave a message here telling me that that's where it happens, but there's no code for it. So I haven't written a code to extract it, and the main reason is none of this is used at the moment. It was for a future expansion, I imagine, of Vaicom to start actioning commands for the aircraft itself. Now, I'll talk about it in a later one as well, but I got some plans for this, particularly around the Jester 2.0, and I'll talk about it in another thing. But anyway, that's what those files are. But let's have a look at records, because the records is quite important. So it's broken down to recipients, export, appendices, and commands. So the recipients, we have the first list, which is recipients with an S, the plural of recipient, and it's basically all the names of every recipient, ATC, JTAC, your flight members, and then each one of these items here has a unique ID which Vaicom uses, and the recipients category is broken down into a few different ones. AI ATC is most of them, AI JTAC, and we have AI flight. Now down the bottom of this file, we also have some recipients for the kneeboard, cargo, and the aux menu, and AOCS, AWACS as well, and tankers and ships, FARPs. So you'll get the gist of it. Now, each one of these also has to have labels, and this label here is what will appear in the log and in the voice attack UI. Now, this blocked for free, it's irrelevant because it's been removed, but for the sake of, rather than going through and removing all this from the code, I've left it in. There's no point. It's removed at the front end of this code, which we'll have a look at. So there's all your recipients. So if you think of them as the people you want to talk to. Now, recipient is different. And it is basically the start and finish of each section of unique IDs. So that's why it's null and maximums. So we just tell it where the IDs are for each one. And that's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot to do in here. It's just if you're expanding things, you'll probably have to come in here and pick that up as well. Export itself. It's a good one. So here we have what gets exported from the editor. So when we do the finish steps, this is where it's controlled from. It looks in the records here. It exports in here. Now, I've just recently done a bit of work on this down here, adding these pragmatic add imported F10 menus commands for ASPX and for VSPX, I should say. And this is the dynamic matched commands here. So that's to ensure they get export for VSPX. The standard export function for the old non-VSPX version of Vaicom is here, and it's very simple. It's a very small code. So you can see that the code is just, it's like spaghetti code. It's just branched out and got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I guess that's why Hollywood probably ended up dropping it, just due to workload reasons. Now, commands, pretty important in here. You have all the commands which are what we say. So, see you at 10, things like that. Now, that's just been fixed. So that's where they exist in there. And there's a command, singular, is the same setup as we saw for recipients in the database. Appendices are just the added ones from the east, which are mainly used with the JTAG. So that's our records section. Now, for every record in there where we defined a label, that label needs to exist in here in the recipients, player call signs. And the way this works is we have basically what the element is and what the label will appear as. So that's what you defined in the database, and this is what you want it to actually say. Everyone needs one, commands needs it. There they are. So there's the label from the database, and that's what it'll actually come out with in the log when it prints. So there are your labels, and we won't look at editor. Aliases, the same thing is true. For every command, you need an alias or aliases. So for recipients, for example, you can see Wingman 1, that is the database entry on this side. This is the alias on this side. So we can say 1 lead, or Wingman 1. Winger is Wingman 2, 2 or 2. So you get the gist there. So you can add as many aliases in. So when we look at Vaicom itself in the editor tab here, and we pick something like 1, you can see it has 3 aliases, and there they are. So all we're doing is defining how many aliases each database entry has. Pretty straightforward. So that's our database. Needs a lot of maintenance, but it's not hard. It's just diving in and making sure it all works. And if you get one of these wrong, you will get an error when you try to compile every time. So in a way, it's a good way of doing it because it means you can't mess this up. Move out of the database and we move down to the file manager. So the file manager is when voice attack runs and it loads, you can see it doing a bunch of checks here on DCS itself, and then it's resetting the export lure, reset the Vaicom Pro export lure, which is the additions that Vaicom makes to export lure, and also it resets all the lures that we load our appendices into. And these three here, these radio lures, is something I added not so long ago because I got sick of the developers of different terrains modules not filling in the radio lure with the appropriate frequencies, which made it for instant select for Vaicom not work very well. So I'm doing it for them, and all I'm doing is copying it into their terrain folder in DCS, and then every time voice attack shuts down, it'll unload and return it to its original state. So we'll have a look at that, but this is where it's all managed from in here, from the file manager. So if I bring that out of there, you can see we have the lure files themselves, export lure, here's its properties. So for every single one, we define it, and then we have a install routine, and here's database import aux menus as well. So file manager, important if you're changing things around, do it in here. And it's also a good way, if like I did with the radio lure, if you want to send a payload up to DCS, it's a great place to do it because it's already constructed and it's quite efficient, and especially its load and extract functions, which mean that you can leave the player's DCS install pure every time it unloads, which is really handy. Okay, so that's file manager, and then we go down to our products, and the main one in here is DCS modules. You can see in DCS modules here, it's just a list of every module, and this is how it appears in the PTT page in here. These are the module names from DCS, how they're defined inside DCS. And over here we have our ID, and these will appear in the PTT where it says no module detected. That's where you get your A10C, and then Warthog or Warthog 2, and that's what writes it. So that's in here, and in that database here, we define whether it's Flaming Cliffs aircraft or not, and that determines the way, how many radios basically we got running in normal mode. Move that out of the way. All that's controlled here. You can also set which theme, in the chatter theme, in auto it will play. So if you have your chatter in expansion here set to auto, it will default to one of these depending what module. So it's a good way if you want to change what people hear with the chatter theme for different modules. That's where it's defined from. Speech alias, I've never really worked this out. It may have been some legacy stuff that Hollywood had going, but anyway, I've maintained it. Still not sure exactly how it was intended to be used. You have your check active licenses. All licenses unlocked. Nothing to do here. It's all been fixed. The product defs in here is just for the different extensions and for the Vaicom, and they're just defined in there. You shouldn't have to do anything in there. Before we go any further, I might just quickly duck back up to helpers. So you've got common helpers, and basically this is how we look at the lure in DCS and break it down to something that Vaicom can use. So in this case, we're looking at radio frequency, so reading the radio frequency. Because in DCS, the radio frequency comes up as just a massive multi-digit number with a lot of zeros on the end. So basically, this just breaks it down and makes it more usable. So that they're kept in helpers. The crypto stuff for the databases is in here, and some of the WinReg stuff is also in there as well. Right, PTT, fair bit of stuff goes in here, mainly in the update radio, so different classes. But if we just look at update radios, in here for certain aircraft, it's how you define the radio with its device ID for that radio. This is where it's defined in here. Update radio SRS is all your radio names. Now, this here has slot maps in here, which Hollywood had started doing, but it's not active at the moment. Never really worked out what his plan was going to be. Here with slot maps, I've played around with it a little bit, doing some stuff to see how I can utilize it. But anyway, that's not used all the way down to here. And this is where we define the actual DCS radios. So this is how they're defined in the DCS code. And all the way down here, add our modules. And then the next one down is SRS. This is when we have in tab and we have SRS selected, so SRS 1, 2, and 3. You can see they are there, SRS 1, 2, and 3. When we connect to the module, it will give us the radio names. So if they change the radio names on the aircraft in the module, you'll need to change them in here to reflect what they are so that they appear in the PTT. So that's where that's kept. Okay, so if we move on now to the server, this is basically, if you think, the back end of Vaicom and how it connects to DCS. So that's in there. It's how it processes the messages. Not a lot to do in here. It did works. It's good. Not broken yet, so I haven't had to muck around in here too much. And the resources. So in here, most importantly, you've got some audio files, which for Jester, but most importantly in the files section, you've got your appended lure files. So this is what is uploaded to DCS on every run of Vaicom, and these are the lure files here. You do a lot of work in here fixing things that don't work, and these are what's appended. So at the end of every DCS lure file, if voice attack is loaded, you'll see this appended Vaicom Pro side script, and it just gets appended and then it gets removed. So here's the appended ones, and down the bottom here we have the originals. Now you'll have to dive into the game every time they update, say common lure in the game, just dive into it, pull it out, copy it in, and otherwise when it unloads, you'll be uploading an old file to the user's DCS and potentially breaking it. So you need to do each one of these every DCS update, make sure they're done. Now at the moment I notice ED's playing around a lot in Radio Command Dialogues panel lure because they're doing a fair bit of work on the AI comms. So anyway, that's where it all is. You have a lot of the different tabs in here for these are just basically the notepad, the kneeboard. They're the kneeboard tabs, just the picture for each one. That's what we got in our resources file section. Bit of work to be done there. Images, icons, things for the UI, all kept in resources there. And then, of course, we have our UI itself, which is here. The code behind each UI and how it works, all pretty straightforward. But what you have also in here is the config window XAML. There we go. Which is great because you can graphically play around with this and change the look of the UI, add features, remove features. So that's how I was able to go into the extensions tab here and add the ability to disable the kneeboard and AI Rio, things like that. So just move things around, redesign this a little bit. So it's great. So you've got a graphical interface for it. He did a good job with this part. It is good. All right, so there's our UI bits and pieces. But what we really need to have a look at before we finish off today is state. So state is basically the state of Vaicom and DCS, where everything starts. In here, so this is where I set whether I'm developing a beta version or a release version. So at the moment I'm deving the next beta version, so it's beta true. Debug user, that's the player name required in the call sign of DCS in your pilot logbook. If you put that in and you are using a beta version and we have deep debug mode set to true, you'll be able to enter the deep debug mode. And we'll talk about that in another video. Also, this is an important one here, database encrypted. For beta ones, I generally have false, so I can play around in there because I'm doing a fair bit of work at the moment with the imported F10 menu, and I just like to see what's actually going on in the background. I don't want them encrypted, so I just have that at false. But for release, you need to set that to true, otherwise you're going to have people poking around in the database itself and potentially you'll have issues. And your version number for the theme. So when it loads in DCS, the actual theme, you set that there. Minimum version for voice attack is there, and there's our default profile name there. The rest of it, you'll poke around in here a bit when you're changing things and adding bits and pieces, but there's your state document. So there's a quick look at file structure, and in the next one, we'll just have a look at workflow. So I plan to just have a look at adding a module and what the workflow is required to add that module. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you get involved. See ya.